September 4th, 2020, about 8 a.m. in the morning. Here we are on Astarte Farm, looking at what's happened in the last 2 weeks since the previous video. We're looking at 2 of our large silage tarps, stretched end to end and pegged down. We've been using this in an attempt for some serious weed control on some beds that had bad bindweed. The major feature with the sun shining on it is the beetle bank. You can see the clumping grasses starting to differentiate a little bit by their seed heads. We've already pulled one trimming on these, tried to kick all of the trimmed stalks back in against the edge of the beetle bank, again in an attempt at weed control. So here's the first pumpkin patch up in field 1 on the farm, and high tunnel number 1 with the side rolled up in sort of a wonky fashion. But what you can see here is that the foliage on the pumpkins is starting to die back. So we're beginning some serious winter squash and pumpkin harvest. We want to get these crops in, get them cured so they're in a good eating situation. And I think you can possibly see that we've got those black woven polyester strips that were running down the beds. It's going to be very interesting to see how this has improved our weed control in this particular section of the field. So here's a shot of the interior of high tunnel number 1. This is where we are experimenting using okra as a cover crop. Now 2 weeks ago you might have seen a very dense stand in there with all the leaves touching and fully canopied over the bed. And then at some point people started saying, well, what if we tried to get an okra crop? So we have gone in and thinned out 60 to 90% of the plants. This will leave us with what would have been a good okra bed if the thinning had been done in a more timely manner. We may still get a small crop off of it, and mostly just to see what we could do. The far end of this bed has been left solid okra, so we'll have something to compare it to. So here's a quick peek at what the okra looks like if it didn't get thinned and we decided not to thin it on this end of the high tunnel. It's just going to be a comparison for next year. How does the soil feel when we're done? Were we able to get any kind of a crop off of those ones that got thinned so late? And here's a shot inside high tunnel number 3. We have Lucas on the left clearing old cucumber vines from the trellis net. It's a bit of a time-consuming project, but we're able to reuse the plastic netting season after season, and that seems like it's well worth it. Center row is cherry tomatoes, probably just starting to get the harvests off of this row, and again, these tomatoes should go several weeks past the first frost, which would be killing all of the field tomatoes. On the right, that's what cucumbers look like when they're going down. And here's another quick shot at the other end of high tunnel 3 with the late tomatoes in it. You can also see down low we've planted calendula as a companion crop. This was one that was planted with the high hopes of being able to sell the edible flowers, but not everything works exactly as you want. If you have really sharp eyes, you might see the many different types of bees buzzing around outside this tunnel. Every little bit of spare space that we have on the farm, we try to get a flowering plant in there, and it can only help with our predator and pollinator populations. So this isn't really a shot of anything that's growing, but this is the way we store our occultation strips and sandbags. And you might be surprised at how many sandbags, how many occultation strips, how many solarization pieces, and how many giant silage tarps it takes to keep ahead of the weeds on a 3.5-acre farm. This is not really what I would call ideal storage because, as you can see, it's still exposed to the sunlight when it's sitting here. When we get a little better organized, we'll try to keep this stuff in the barns. You may be able to see red tags on the occultation strips. That's a process we started a couple of years ago where we are actively marking each one as we put it away so we know what the length is, and it makes it a lot easier when we're looking for that piece to lay out. So here we are in field 2. You can just see the start of some fall carrots germinating in this bed. Without doing a close-up, you wouldn't be able to see how close together the individual plants are. This will probably need to be hand thinned once or twice, and we have been using a new seeder this year. I think we need to keep working on the accuracy that we're getting from that new machine. On the right is our blueberry netting, which we have devised a new purpose for, and I will show you in the next shot. So here we are at one of the doors into the blueberry netting enclosure, and we have recently added 6 chickens to help us with the weeding and the insect control. We have had some problem with cranberry fruitworm over the years. We're hoping that the chickens will gather up all of the dropped blueberries and make that a part of their diet. They definitely are enjoying scratching in the wood chips and mulch. It's going to be a bit of a long, slow process, but they'll be adding some significant fertility to the patch, as well as providing pretty reasonable weed control. We may not have enough chickens, but we may devise a way to move them around so they clean up one section at a time more thoroughly. The yellow flowering plants that you can see here, that's our wonderful partridge pea. I don't have close-up capabilities, but I can already see several different varieties of bees buzzing in to get a drink of nectar, and that's been a wonderful addition to the farm. And the eggplant looks like it's actually having a bit of a rebound now that we've gotten some rain the end of August and the beginning of September. Irrigation works well, but rain falling from the sky really does the best. It does a nice even soaking of the ground, and it looks like these guys may have outgrown some of their extreme flea beetle damage that we had earlier in the season, and I suspect will keep going and giving us a crop until at least the first frost. So early blight was a fairly significant problem this year in the cherry tomatoes. We did eventually get some straw mulch down on them to protect the soil from splashing up on the lower leaves, but it was too little too late. It was probably too light an application of straw. We might have another 2 or 3 pickings off of this patch, and we're hoping that by that time the high tunnel cherries will be bearing well and we'll be able to continue marketing them. Just a quick shot of the lettuce that we showed you in the earlier video. It obviously has taken off and is getting ready to provide us with a nice crop here. And if you look to the right, you can see what early blight will do to a slicing tomato or a beefsteak tomato, and the story is no happier there than it was in the cherries. So if you remember from the first video, the bed on the left was flail mode before we laid down the occultation strip. And that's had good, firm soil contact over the last 2 weeks. I'm pretty sure we're going to see really well-digested organic matter under there when we pull that strip up. On the right, we had laid down the strip directly over some fairly vigorous weeds and crop residue. It was really domed up, and I can see today that it's collapsed, and I would suspect that we've had some beginnings to digesting the crop residue and possibly some of the weed matter as well. These strips really will prevent weed germination. They do not restrict something that I call torpedo grass. That's something that's got a white stolon-like root that stores a lot of energy, and it will continue to push up in the complete darkness under that strip, looking for light, and in extreme cases, I have seen it actually lift the strip right up and allow air and sunlight under for that weed and all its friends. It'll be interesting to see what this one looks like when we pull the strip off. So moving on past the beetle bank, the first bed has an occultation strip laid down on it. And it looks like we're in pretty good shape, but if you can see on the right-hand border of the occultation strip, we have some tall grass stems with seed heads on them. And to me, this is really a problem as far as getting rid of grass out here in this field. We need to get in here possibly with a string trimmer, see if we can trim that stuff completely away from the occultation strip. And we'll probably have to be careful when we remove the occultation strip. If it has a lot of dried seed that landed on it, we don't want to dump that right down into the bed. The next two beds are Jim's dry bean project, and it looks like he's harvested half of the first bed, and I suspect run a flail mower over that. So he's chopped up all of the crop residue, and that will be ready for an application of compost, and then we will plant our garlic into that. Next bed to the right is the one he planted maybe 2 weeks later, and I think he's going to pull it off. It looks to me like the back half of this first bed is ready to harvest, possibly the far side of the next bed is ready to harvest, and then he may be able to finish up with a good harvest of black-eyed peas. One of the fun things about black-eyed peas is it actually works as a cover crop. You could get your beans right off the cover crop and sell them fresh or dried, and the legume bean has provided quite a bit of nitrogen into that bed. So here we have some more fall crops going in. The two left-hand beds are spinach. We have 3 rows in each bed, and this is a variety of spinach that should overwinter well. Depending on the fall, we'll have 1 or 2, possibly 3 cuttings before the cold weather and the lower sunlight sets in. And then that crop will revive in the early spring and give us some of the sweetest spinach you could possibly grow. Over on the right, we have 2 beds where we're trying daikon as a single cover crop seed. I've grown daikon as part of a cocktail before. We used to like to grow daikon with oats and peas. Sometimes the daikon had a strong enough leaf to help hold up the oats and peas and keep it on top of the bed, if you will, as opposed to lodging over into the path. This is going to be a bit of an experiment. I think we've seeded it very thickly, and we probably are going to need to hand thin it down to about 6-inch spacing, in which case the daikon should make a wonderful canopy of leaves this fall. The roots may go down 12, 18 inches and then die over the winter, and they will provide wonderful, soft, already pre-holed soil, if you will, because there'll be a well of nitrogen-rich material from the decomposing radish that we'll be able to plant right into in the spring. So this cover crop of oats and peas is starting to show some bulk now here in the first week of September. This should really be a nice base for our garlic planting in October. One of the issues is going to be, are the oats strong enough to hold up the peas as they begin to really put on some weight above the ground? It looks like a good shot at it. We expect to run our roller crimper down here and then plant through that grown in place mulch. If it gets too unruly, most likely we will run our flail mower down each one of these beds. That will chop the material pretty finely and leave us somewhere between an inch and a half of green chopped mulch to plant into. The beds on the right, again, that's some of our individually planted beds of hemp, and you can see the beautiful colors on the second beetle bank. That bank has also had a good trimming. We may go in and trim it again because it's a wonderful addition to the farm, but we can't afford to have big blue stem laying down and blocking the light from our hemp. So now we're down at the end of the field past the asparagus, and this is more winter squash and pumpkins being grown here. This was an area of particularly tough weeds last year, and we actually decided to use the occultation strips in the pathways to try and kill back some of that grass that's been tremendously established. Now if you look down the left-hand bed, you can see an awful lot of weed seed heads sticking up. So this may be an area that gets the silage tarps next year, and we'll continue to work on improving this part of the field. So this video is just a quick drive-by showing the beginning of the hemp patch, which is mulched with cardboard and wood chips, and then right about this location we change over to the straw mulch. You may see a difference in the darkness of the plants. I believe we're getting a little better nitrogen uptake in this area, and it's just been an interesting experiment and showing us very clearly how something that works well in a pathway might not be as ideal when used in a crop producing area. As I said before, I'm sure we're going to get plenty of good quality bud off of this hemp, even the ones on the cardboard and wood chips. We just might have cut back the quantity. Here's just a quick peek at the butternut squash patch that we have this year. Butternut squash takes a little longer to mature in the field, so we're giving it another couple of weeks. Looks like we've got a pretty nice crop in there. Nice looking stand of oats and peas here. We can only hope that all of our cover crops look this nice before the cool weather sets in. So it turns out that the grapes have been a great success at River Valley Market this year. I think we're on our third picking this week. It's been very interesting to see that the wine grapes have sweetened up considerably, as well as the table grapes. Jim has been going through and selectively pruning off excess foliage in order to let the sun get on the fruit and finish the ripening process. Here are some of the grapes where the foliage has been pruned away to let the sun reach the fruit, and it's our belief that getting sun directly on the fruit is hastening the ripening process. I believe this is a green variety called Niagara. Similarly, this is a wine variety, I believe, whose name escapes me, but we've managed to get most of the foliage pruned away so that we get some direct sun on the fruit, and even though the grapes are a little smaller, they have been deliciously sweet.